Yeah.
Welcome everybody to episode 98 of Dork Tunes. So we're getting there. We are so close to the 100, and details of those episodes are coming out very, very soon. But trust me, you're going to love it. So this week, normally, as you know, I would get somebody to introduce themselves, which I'm going to, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint. So one second.
You
Who
have
could
it
it be?
in hand.
Yes. So you're more than welcome to introduce yourself now, officially.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Andy Rorman, sometimes better known as Scientific, SCNTFC, and I am the composer of a lot of games in the past, but currently I'm full-time with Night School Studio.
Mhm. So thank you for the first part to being a guest on the show. It has been something of a journey.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm not used to being more managed, but now that I'm with Night School, and they have PR people to help me with
Mm.
this kind of thing. So it was
Yeah,
kind of getting through the woods on all that to
yeah,
finally be able to just sit down and talk about making music for games.
yeah. And it's funny, it's not the first time that it's happened before because I've had guests on who've literally had PR sat
Hmm.
on Skype listening in.
Yes.
And I'm fine with that. It really isn't bother because I'm never going to say anything or do anything that's going to be, damaging to someone's brand or someone else's brand, etc. You know, I'm just here to have fun. As I mentioned to you prior to we started, um, it's very not scripted. I don't like having kind of a set of questions because I think it sounds really stilted. You're not getting to know the person. But one of the things I do generally ask as my first question is how did you get to where you are right now? And I explain that by being, there are some people who went the classical route and they studied music at university and they went on, whatever happened. There are other people who just had friends who were in the industry and kind of said, look, you kind of like music or you're kind of very good at doing music, would you like to join in? Let's do something together, and all that kind of stuff. So what do you?
Yeah, I'd say I'd have a very unconventional way into the industry. Because it happened late in my career. I was already doing music for other disciplines, film and TV and advertising. And so it was a good segue into this and gave me a lot of basic skills for making music for video games. But yeah, it happened kind of on accident. And even getting into it at all, I never looked at music as a career, but I was
Mhm.
a designer and worked with animators and things to make uh uh advertisements and whatnot, and some of those projects needed music, so I hired myself to music. Then I had a friend who had a lucky break and got some good advertising jobs, and he brought me on to do music. But then I think the very first thing I did um, with respect to video games was I met at the time, the audio director for Microsoft Game Studios. He just happened to be my neighbor, and
Oh, wow.
I was at the local coffee shop just a couple blocks away talking to another friend about music. And Guy Whitmore, that person, the audio director, had seen me perform live. I used
Okay.
to do live music
Yes.
and invited me out to Microsoft to meet some folks and talk about how I uh, make,
Yeah.
adaptive electronic music and how that could maybe relate to how video games work. So that was kind of the first connection.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, blind luck, got coffee at the right place at the right
It's the right
time,
time.
loud enough talking to my friend that someone overheard and invited me in. Yeah.
And it just happened to be your neighbor.
Yes. So then from there, then it was just, building rep. So never really networked hard or, went on the job hunt It
Mm.
was just doing the best work I could from project to project until, then I could do a full soundtrack and, have a good relationship with that developer and someone else, mutual friends or whatnot. And it just, yeah, snowballed from there.
And then, so obviously we're going to talk about the big one, really, obviously, Oxenfree. How did that actually happen for you? Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? Kind of luck as well. Uh, so I was already doing a significant amount of video game work, still splitting time with linear media.
Yeah.
And that came through because Sean Krankel was studio lead at uh, night school. We had mutual friends. And
Yeah.
back in my live performance and just kind of making weird electronic music days, this mutual friend had one of my CDs in his car.
Yeah.
Sean asking how I really like this. And years, I think this was even years before Oxenfree was a thing.
Mm.
He thought back to hearing that music and then contacted that mutual friend. It was like, hey, do you have this guy's email? I would be interested to see if he'd like to try making music for a video game.
Yeah.
And so that was Sean's, I think, probably first email or text message to me was like, would you be interested in working on a video game? And I'd say, well, funny enough, that's what I've been doing for a couple of years now. So yeah. And yeah, so that again was friends as well.
Mm.
And then yeah, I just demoed and it seemed to be the right thing for the project and the rest is history.
How long did you actually spend on Oxenfree?
Good question. Well, they didn't have anybody signed on for audio at that point. So the first question was, would you like to do music? And then the second question was, what about everything else? Audio.
Yeah.
And I had been working in Unity and doing implementation and sound design as well at that time. So it wasn't too tough for me to say, yeah, let's do this all. The game takes place in the Northwest, so I, can do the field recording here. It already, have nature recordings from around the Northwest. Um, so that all kind of fit into place, except for schedule. It was just like there was just not enough time
Yeah.
for me to do everything. So then we hired a sound designer uh to uh take on all of that so I could focus on music.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know, but offhand, maybe 9 months to a year.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's quite a long period as it is anyway. But
Yeah.
how close was your relationship with the sound designer then?
Can you say that again? Sorry, there's a
Sorry.
garbage truck
How close was your
rattling around.
relationship with the sound designer then?
So the designer Jason, not too close. Luckily he's LA based, so he was
Yeah.
able to be in their studio.
Mhm.
And so he could work directly with the engineers on implementation. So basically Jason started and I kind of said, this is what I've done. These are the ambiences I've placed. This is how everything's organized. And from there, he's amazing. He just kind of took it and ran with it
Mhm.
and quickly became like this concern of, oh no, there's a new person coming in. What are they going to do? To
Yeah.
seeing his work and having full confidence that I was like, okay, I don't have to worry about this uh, anymore. And that's my favorite working relationship and that we have with, the sound designers that we work with currently at night school, uh, is a lot of confidence in their skills.
Mhm.
And so there doesn't have to be a lot of like
Management.
micromanageries
Yeah.
going on.
It's
We kind of set the tone. We often talk about me kind of being the creative director for audio, so the
mhm.
sonic tone. So beyond music, really making sure we've defined what a game needs,
Yeah.
and then they can go for it. So
Mhm.
perfect examples of that with Oxenfree would be, portal sounds, the
Yeah.
sonic for ghost voices,
Mhm.
how the radio
Radio bit.
functions. Yeah, so that's all stuff that I would either make just audio demos or would prototype with an engineer and say, I think this is how it should function. And then that then can act as a blueprint for the remainder of the work.
And Oxenfree has obviously been out for quite some time. You know, the vinyl was released. It was a massive smash. Oxenfree 2 came out a while ago. Um, I believe there's vinyl for that. Is there?
Yes.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Um, how did you find it? Because obviously, when it released, it just became this huge beast.
Oh, yeah. You mean how do I relate to it getting popular?
Yeah, yeah, almost. Yeah, kind of going.
Um,
That's my stuff in that, and you're like, eh.
yeah. Yeah, I mean it's been fun. It's not the most weirdly, it's not the most popular game I've worked on in terms of like amount of players,
Mhm.
but it's the one with kind of the most, I would say the most active fan base and the most like interaction
Yeah,
uh with the soundtrack and all the auxiliary stuff. So I'm much more aware of it than I am on some of the other projects I've worked on that may have had a larger player base, but they're just, I don't know, because of platform or the type of game just aren't as engaged as Oxenfree
yeah,
fans.
and I think Oxenfree really hit a kind of chord with a lot of people. And I particularly fell in love with the story and the way it was designed, and I loved the kind of radio bits, the kind of the conversations that they would have. They actually sounded like conversations that I would have with friends. If you know what I mean? It wasn't that kind of this is scripted. We must say this there. You know, it really sounded natural and it was really kind of it sounded organic almost. And it was great. You know, and
Yeah.
then you know, tons of people fell in love with the music. You know, like seriously, there are tracks on the soundtrack that if that was played in the club, I would be pumped.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that focus on, I would say, storytelling, but natural sounding dialogue is
Mm,
it's a primary focus for night school, and they did
mm.
a great job with it. Obviously great actors who brought the characters to life.
Yes,
Um, and so in turn, then music is, scoring everything. Uh, but kind of has not an easier time, but just a more an easier time connecting emotionally
yes.
versus like I don't know, music I've
Like,
done for like combat or
yeah.
less
Or like
emotionally.
film or TV.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Kind of across the board.
Yeah,
Like, so that's kind of the cheat. Like people love these characters, they love the world of the game. So they're like one of the easiest ways to continue that vibe is to listen to the music. So they go listen to the music and that, you know, it's a great cycle.
yeah,
Whereas, yeah, other games I've worked on, again, maybe more players, but the music isn't as much the focus, and the emotions aren't as much the focus. It's more kind of casual gameplay. Um, and so in turn, people just don't then necessarily search out the soundtrack.
yeah.
Uh, and
But it's
uh,
nice that they do.
yes, absolutely. But it's also, this is reflected in like what I've worked on that does have like a vinyl release and what doesn't. It's like Oxenfree, like, yes, exactly.
Like,
And
yeah,
that's a repress because the
yes.
initial pressing like just sold out instantly and people have been waiting for it forever. Um,
Honestly, I waited for this for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. When it came through the door, I was like, this is never actually it.
yeah.
And it's
Well, I'm
been,
glad yeah. I think we're over that, but this was part of the global like
yeah.
vinyl backlog.
Oh, yeah, we all went a bit mad.
Yeah, it was like years
Yeah,
uh to not even like from idea to like literally having your artwork and music all ready.
yeah,
It then goes in a line that will take 2 years to get through it.
yeah.
It
And didn't one of the biggest production plants go on fire and just burn down completely?
Yep, so one burned down. I think obviously that was a contributor, but yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah,
So yeah, hopefully things have
settled
evened
down.
out for the Oxenfree 2 stuff.
Yeah. But it must be nice for you to be able to like sit now and look back at it and kind of go, you know, I've got the vinyl. that's awesome. People are really appreciating it, and you're getting it from across the world. I'm in a
Yeah,
Discord for video game music vinyl collectors, and they are, in a word, gracious
yeah,
for anything.
yep, yeah. And I think it's a lucky niche, which is a lot of times, there's not much physical to connect to when a game is released these days. And
Yeah,
I think that's why obviously game releases, Switch cartridges or whatnot are important, but vinyl's a great way for people to say, I love this game,
yeah,
and this is a way to have like a piece of it. Um, so yeah, it's a lucky niche
yeah.
to be.
And I mean, it's not a cheap hobby, but it's something that I would never be without.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
you can see behind me here.
uh-huh.
I have a lot of records. Those are all 45s.
Oh
That's the
wow.
Oxenfree radio. And
Oh
then,
wow.
yep, that's vinyl. And that line goes around the corner into the dark there.
And I
Yeah, a
see you
lot
have
of,
some toys as well on the walls.
yep, yeah, various guitars and a cello and whatnot.
Are you one of those composers that, and I'm not going to name names because that's a bit fair, but when they are starting, or mainly when they're starting a new project, they, excuse me,
Mhm,
they will buy themselves a little treat,
mhm.
like behind
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
because it
certainly.
helps for your work.
Yeah, and it really does, honestly. Uh, I'm looking right now to even trace those stories. Yeah, so that is the base for After Party, basically,
Oh
was
wow,
when
okay.
yeah, we knew the specific um kind of vibe we needed for some of the bars. I was like, well, obviously this needs to be dingy, like rock bar or punk. And I realized I used to have a bass, but somehow I don't know, given it away, or
Yeah,
a friend borrowed it and I forgot or something. I didn't have a bass. So that's very specifically, it's like a Epiphone EB0, but you can't tell from here, but it's like a nice deep red,
yeah.
and it's kind of got some devil horns to it in a way. So I was like, oh, this is perfect.
And is that a
Um,
banjo?
yep. Banjo I've just had forever. So that was not for a specific project. But yeah, so things will pop up where I think of like, I don't know, sonic signature that I'm unfamiliar with, or something that I want to explore, and then it becomes a pretty valuable resource. So the cello is a great example. It's like I'm a terrible cello player, but I was actually interested in, what unique effects can we get from that
I have to,
instrument.
yeah, I have to admit,
Uh,
cello and
yeah,
clarinet for me on a
yeah,
soundtrack just blow my mind.
yeah,
The things that they can do are just phenomenal.
yeah. So the way I actually have used that is pretty unique, which is, sampled instruments.
Yeah.
There's so much in them. So the score for Jet is a great example of most of it is sampled instruments, but there were specific things I just had in my brain that
Mm,
I knew I wanted. Uh, that are impossible to get from a pre-sampled instrument, and
yeah.
thankfully didn't require like super, super high amounts of skill.
Uh,
So I can essentially record myself and uh accentuate the rest of the music with that. So
mhm.
with that, I was doing ostinatos, or very specific bowing techniques.
Yes.
Um, there's kind of these pitchy swoops in some of the music for Gibbon that I worked on with Broken Rules, where I was like, well, this specific sound I just don't think is sampled anywhere. So that's where I just, I play that one part, and all the better sounding stuff is, not me, because I can't do all the fancy stuff. But those basic kind of, you know, raw kind of performance
And
modes I can get a handle on.
actually, you just picked on something that I would love to find out a bit more about. Is do you prefer working like solely by yourself on a soundtrack, or do you prefer kind of having someone that you can kind of bounce off at some point?
Um, Definitely
Isn't
writing. Yeah, definitely writing myself. I've been in bands, I used to play I used to play
yes.
drum. And I enjoyed it for sure, but my personal creativity really took off when I could have the means to kind of do everything myself. Um, and then it's just literally right person for the job and
Yeah.
budget. I'd love to hire a whole orchestra, but if it's not there, then it's, where can we focus the, right person for the job mentality? So for example, on Jet, there were these choir parts that
Mm,
is far away from my expertise. So that's how we ended up hiring Priscilla Snow to essentially write all that stuff, help perform it,
yeah.
uh, and get the quality stuff in there that I just wasn't capable of myself. So a lot of things like that.
Yeah. I can imagine one day that you could be stood, or you will be stood in Abbey Road or Air Studios and going, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, if it really is those two things, budget and necessity,
yeah.
uh, because a lot of what I'm asked to do, there is no reason for other musicians. Oxenfree being a perfect example of that. But even after party, I mentioned playing bass.
Yeah.
I was a drummer, but I'm no longer skilled enough. So there is a drummer, an old friend of mine played drums for some of the pieces on
Yeah.
After Party. Again, because I knew the style we needed and I knew I couldn't accomplish that. And
And
so hired out.
did you have a different kind of viewpoint from when you scored Oxenfree to when you start scoring and working on Oxenfree 2?
Yeah, I mean this was an interesting one because I've it's a sequel.
Mhm.
I was doing another weirdly. The only other sequel I've done was Concurrent, which was moving from virtual reality and working on virtual reality 2 with Tender Claws. Kind
Okay.
of working on those at the same time. So kind of learning the ropes of, okay, well, I can take themes, what do I want to do the same, and then what do I want to do different? And the primary driver for Oxenfree to Oxenfree 2 was there's this philosophy that I was scoring the place and not
Yeah.
the characters and the plot. So got to keep going with that. But we had the sense that the characters we were following, this was later in their lives, they were more mature.
Mhm.
Um, and
Slower.
so we thought of how can the music grow up
Yeah.
as well, but still reflect like it's the score for the place. And so those are kind of the drivers. Um, Coupled with that, we had the opportunity to have a more adaptive soundtrack that was more closely scored to the action.
Yeah.
Whereas Oxenfree was very like, here's music for this general feel, and it goes in there, and then it doesn't change nearly as much as it does in Oxenfree 2, where we have, quick pivots based on, player action that really change up the music. So we had that as well to contend with.
And I'm going to slightly swing past that now for a moment and ask you, what are the soundtracks that you kind of really rate, um, other than
You mean,
works of your own?
say that again. So soundtracks, not
That you,
mine. That
yeah, that you really rate.
um, I'm a okay. So it's obvious I like John Carpenter. Um, but I'm a huge fan of Escape from New York.
Mhm.
As a film, it's the best. I don't know
Yeah.
what else I can say. I was actually literally walking around listening to it yesterday.
Uh-huh.
There's a live version, so I
Oh,
don't know if you know this, but yeah, so John Carpenter works with his son
mm,
on newer. They've done, records together.
mhm.
But they did essentially like a live recorded version, so it's more band focused than the original Escape from New York theme. Uh, and it's just like that's so good. Um, that's an obvious example. Wendy Carlos,
Yeah.
for The Shining and Tron. Um, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Not nearly as obvious in my writing, but like all the weird stuff Goblin did in the 70s for like the zombie movies,
Yeah.
for Italian uh zombie films. Uh, like that stuff is just mind blowing.
It's really funny. I used to be able to watch horror films like what I'd be like, "Hmm," and now I can't even.
Oh
No,
yeah. Oh, I
yeah,
yeah, I still absorb as much as I can. I don't know if you've heard, yeah, recent scores. That Colin Stetson soundtrack for Hereditary is incredible. Everything Ben Salisbury and Jeff Barrow have done. Uh, Annihilation, obviously, Ex
yeah,
Machina. Um, Probably like people making stuff right now,
mm,
my favorites. And Annihilation just because it's, I don't know if you're familiar, but it really blurs the line between score, sound design, even diegetic.
mhm,
Essentially, this melodic synth thing becomes the voice of the alien.
mhm,
It's great stuff. Men was great too, the more recent
yeah.
um uh one from that director, Alex Garland, is that his
Mm.
name?
Oh yes,
Um
Alex Garland. Yes, he did the beach and
yeah.
he did that other one. I can't remember the name, but the guy from Star Wars in it, which was really good. That alien
Um
robot.
yeah. So that's more recent people whose work I've really enjoyed. But also I look at, just non-score
Hmm.
music for inspiration almost more than I do soundtracks. I am probably pretty uneducated with respect to soundtrack composers relative to most other people who do what I do for a living.
Are you one of those people that walk down the street and you'll be like, "Gotta record this. I've heard this noise. This noise is really interesting. I gotta go," and off you
Oh yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah, and for sound design especially.
Hmm.
Weirdly, my favorite story about that sort of thing isn't even a sound I recorded, but
Hmm.
there's a creature sound in Jet that I designed, but the origin of it was a recording that a friend had made with his iPhone and I think he had posted it to Twitter. It was just the most outlandish sound of his window. This is
Hmm.
Corey Schmitz, who's he's a great graphic designer, did the Jet logo, did
Beautiful logo. It is
yeah,
beautiful logo.
Oxenfree Lost
Hmm.
Signals logo. Yeah. It's very popular in design. But he had posted the sound of his window making the most horrifying howling sound in a windstorm in
Hmm.
Chicago. It was like, wow, this is crazy. And I was like, DM'd him immediately. It's like,
Can I have that,
that?
please?
Can I have that? And can we have permission
Hmm.
to use it? And that, .m4a iPhone recording was then manipulated and used as a primary creature voice in
Wow.
Jet.
It's funny
Yeah.
where you think where you get your sound, the sounds that you use sometimes. You must
Yeah.
think people must know. People will never know where that comes from.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And, I'm constantly curious. And I think, again, that's what draws me to um, work like uh, Annihilation or the Colin Stetson Hereditary score. If you're not familiar with it,
Mhm.
he's primarily, I believe, a saxophone player, but he
Okay.
does all kinds of crazy breathing and voice techniques. So he
Okay.
gets these just the most otherworldly tones. Um, And that, which is a horror movie with some really gory, horrifying stuff in it, has this most awful finale, but it's the most angelic sounding music to go along with it, which is just so perfect. And I know there's other stuff, but at the core of his writing is these incredible techniques he can make by just getting these, yeah, massive sounds out of a
Yeah.
saxophone.
You've just reminded me. I've seen the end, but it was dubbed over with something else. And yeah, I've seen kind of a bit towards the end of that. I think it was on TikTok or something. It's weird. But
Hmm.
yeah, I do know. So,
It
I
had to
mean,
do with a headless body floating through the air and into a treehouse. Yeah, it's very, very weird, but very great.
yeah,
Yeah.
bit like the
That's
film, one of the films I always remember watching, I don't think we will ever watch again, was the original, because I didn't realize until a few years ago that there was a remake, and apparently it's all bad.
Hereditary, the remake. I didn't know
No,
that.
Jacob's Ladder, the original Jacob.
Oh, oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
What a film.
Yeah.
Remember the dance floor part?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that
Oh yeah.
was,
I know that. I know that movie well. I probably revisited it. I don't know about I watched it again about a year ago. But yeah,
yeah.
that's been a long
Does it
favorite.
still hold up?
I felt not quite as well. Uh uh and I'm not sure why, but I was like, oh, it wasn't, but yeah, it's still good. It's
Yeah,
for sure still good. Not I would just say not quite. I'm a horror nerd, so
yeah.
I could go forever on this subject. Um
My
like
friends
a
got to,
movie I return to regularly that I just can't believe. I'm in disbelief how good it is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
uh-huh,
Is That's a masterpiece. And every time I do this with a lot of my favorite films.
mhm,
I'm like, I can't believe it's as good as I thought. Yeah, it probably is actually bad. And then I go back and I'm like, no, this was great. And that is one that just every time I watch it, I'm just like in awe of
yeah,
just how good it is. And
yeah.
bringing this to the subject at hand, the sound design in that is they recorded like slaughterhouses,
Oh,
and that is just part of the sound bed
yeah,
um, in certain scenes, and it's just so effective and just like how grisly and horrifying the subject matter is, and super impactful of just a
so
slaughter.
I have one more question. We're running out of time, but are you one of those people that when you finish your music, you kind of put it up on the shelf and go, right, that's it, never to be or for a long, long time. Don't listen to it. Do you listen to your stuff when you've finished it? Or like say a year down the line, you kind of go, I'll put this on when I'm doing the dishes. Just, have a
Yeah.
listen.
I would say never in that way, never in just for entertainment purposes way. I actually listening is a huge part of my writing,
Mm,
like self, like analysis, not just mixes, even just trying to, get to grips with like, is this piece of music doing what it's supposed to? Is it effective?
mm,
I spend the time just listening as much as I do tweaking things or adding instruments or recording it in the first place. Like
yeah,
that is a thing.
yeah.
Um, I make playlists and I put them, you know, on on the phone and just walk around the
Then you're
neighborhood.
taking stuff off and adding stuff in. You're
Yep.
like, that one doesn't fit it there.
I make mix notes as the most obvious, but yeah, just really like, and in that swirl, because there's so much going on, hours and hours of music for a score.
Yeah,
Uh, and then even the amount of time from beginning to end. Jet, I worked on essentially for 8 years. Um, so it's finding those relationships from, oh, I made this piece of music 6 years ago. How does it relate to the other things that are I've done more recently, and it doesn't need updates or changes, or have I made a decision where, say, an instrument became more thematic and crucial that I can go in back and replace an instrument from back then. Or Oxenfree isn't as big of a time, but it's like I went back and I rated the, not just what ended up on the soundtrack, but what didn't. And I was like, ooh,
yeah,
this is good. I'm gonna use this chunk, or I'm gonna sample this and make something new out of it. So yeah, a lot of listening in as things are being produced is
yeah.
huge for me. Just a lot of self-analysis.
Fantastic. So, I think, again, to reiterate, I know the sickness will get to where we are now, but we got here, and I have to say a huge thank you for spending the time speaking because I know how busy you are. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks. Yeah, and apologies, I had to squeeze it in between
Yeah,
meetings.
it's
Yeah,
absolutely fine.
the new life as an audio director is basically just that. Yeah, I'm scheduling meetings, whereas yeah,
Oh,
freelance, there were just never meetings.
no, I know. I was back to back meetings today, and it's not normal like that for me. So I'm just a bit bedfrosted. So I'm going to go watch some telly now.
Yes, sounds good.
But
And
thank you, and best of luck with anything that comes in the future. And I'm sure that we'll be hearing some stuff in the not too near from you.
Yep. Fingers crossed. Yep. There's a lot happening. Unfortunately, none of it I can talk about. So,
No, I know the lovely word
yeah,
NDA.
that's my world.
Yeah, but thank you. Have a lovely
Yeah.
day. Hopefully not too many
Yeah.
more
Thank
meetings.
you.
And
Yep.
appreciate it and see you soon. Take
Likewise.
care.
Bye.